what kind of composer you think you are?
I just write contemporary music, and I've been a part of many traditions. I grew up in those traditions. Gunther Schuller, the first time I played Amariques actually was with Gunther Schuller conducting it at Tanglewood in 1979. So I look forward to hearing that again. I mean, I remember playing it. I've heard it since then. It's a fascinating piece. Duke Ellington, of course, I'm in the kind of spiritual ancestry of him. Our jazz orchestra was formulated with surviving members of his band from 55 to 74. Members of my septet, we were then in our 20s and early 30s. They were in their 60s and early 70s. And members of Thad Jones, Mel Lewis band, and they were in their 40s. And it's on the program. It's programmed many times with Bernstein's music also, or Gershwin's music. And I'm also a part of those traditions, Bernstein being associated with Tanglewood, and I knew the maestro. And I played Prokofiev Fifth under him and knew him and spoke with him many times. His family let me use all of their archives when I did some young people's concerts that were on TV. And I loved him and his music.
Let's talk about the two figures that you've mentioned. Gunther Schuller, first of all, who we talked to many times on this program. And I wonder whether what you're doing in your fourth symphony, The Jungle, is part of the tradition that he, or in a sense, created or certainly codified, this third stream. Do you think in those terms?
I don't think in those terms. I try to find things that have existed where we tried to come together from the very beginning of American classical music. And there's many uses of symphonic orchestra in American music that are not concert music. And a lot of people solved a lot of problems. Film music, for example, a lot of problems were solved in that. Broadway, many problems were solved. Different types of commercial music, many problems were solved. In the first New Orleans band, they were playing violins, and then they were replaced by cornets. There's an early figure, actually one of the first published American composers named Francis Johnson. He played keyed bugle and violin. So in him was the seeds of a tradition that contains a kind of Celtic fiddle style and that roots of what an American music would sound like, and all strains of Afro-American music. He had a summer pop series, you would never know it, in the 1820s. And he was also a fantastic cornet soloist. So I'm very much embraced the musics that I can embrace, and that a lot of them I know because I grew up playing a lot of different kinds of music. I didn't understand what the meaning of any of it was. I just happened to be in a city with a father that's a musician, and there were a lot of gigs for trumpet players. If you had an E-flat trumpet, you could play. If you had a piccolo trumpet, you played every Easter because there weren't a lot of trumpet players with piccolo trumpets. Whereas had I been in New York, I would have never had the opportunity to work. But because I was playing in a funk band, I had enough money to buy a piccolo trumpet. Then, so the traditions are things, and Gunther Schuller auditioned me to go to tango when I was 17. And he was a mentor of mine. I was extremely close with him. We argued a lot. We didn't philosophically see things the same way about certain things, but much of his thinking, not about third stream, but about music and musical excellence, is the foundation of things, I think. I would make records. I would always call him and go out to his crib in Massachusetts and play for him and have him critique me. And I feel fortunate that before he passed away, a year before that, we were at a thing at the Dave Brubeck Institute, and I had the opportunity to publicly talk about the impact that he had on me and the type of respect and love that I have for him. So none of the things in our traditions do I feel separated from because I experienced those as a young person.
But the way you talk, Wynton Marsalis, about these traditions suggests that they're all of a piece, these different musics, and that you see no barriers between them or dividing lines. But I mean, there's a lovely quote from Duke Ellington, who's the other figure I wanted to ask you about. I don't know where jazz itself starts or where it stops, where Tin Pan Alley starts or where jazz ends, or even where more serious music and jazz divide. It's always seemed to me that for you, you're quite clear on those divisions.
Yeah. And I think it's very important to know what things are. It doesn't mean you can't put them together however you want. But once you don't know what they are, you can't teach anybody anything. You basically have signed your own death warrant because nobody knows what it is. And therefore, what will happen is whatever is the easiest thing for it to be, it will become that. And like if this microphone is not a microphone, if it's not a radio show, if your name is not Andrew, let's just take it to the extreme, then communication becomes very difficult. Now let's talk about very complex meanings in mythology. We can argue forever on the meaning of things and mythological significance, and that's one of the great joys of intellectual life, is arguing about the meaning of David and Goliath or whatever your myth you like to argue about. But when you start to say, this is not a myth, this has no meaning, and it's the same as X pornography on so-and-so, and it actually becomes all the same, then the common denominator is going to bring it down to a certain level where there's no need to intellectualize about it. It just will become whatever. And we've seen that in America with the return of the minstrel show. The minstrel show is easy for it to return because it's in the character of the country. And without a certain type of belief in education and in a strong perspective, and those can be competing and opposing perspectives. They don't have to agree, but they do have to have a certain type of intellectual rigor. That was Gunther Schuller's point. He was very rigorous intellectually, so you didn't have to agree with him, but you had to listen to those records he was talking about.
And I guess you're also talking here about relativism, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm talking about it. I mean, I know it's good in the university, but why not? You know, it's a certain kind of everything is everything. Everything is relative. Actually, the truth is, you have to give meaning to things because everything is relative.
So because of that, you have to pick and choose and decide what's important.
Yeah, because it's all relative. Like, what's an A? What is a B? What is a not? The only time it's not relative is things that have to do with mathematics. Like what it takes to construct a bridge that will bear X amount of weight, that's not relative.
The last time we spoke, and I've remembered this ever since, and quoted it to other people, you told me that you thought that all jazz, and I think you went as far as to say all music, is modern if it's being made in the here and now. I
believe that, and I also think we don't know, how much music do we know? I remember the first time I heard Palestrina. Man, I didn't know what that was. It's new to me. It's modern. Somebody has to tell you then, well, that was in the 16th century. Wow, man, somebody was thinking about that in the 16th century. But our wisdom is accumulated. It's not, we don't put a date on it. When you learn how to do something, if you learn how to cook a certain dish tomorrow, that dish is new. And the assigning of values as if they're to scientific commercial products, to things that are aesthetic or communal, that's very short-lived, impoverished idea.
So where does style come into it for you? Because I think a lot of people think in terms of style when they talk about modernity.
I think that's a very superficial way to act. Like we had afros in 1975. So if you didn't have afro, you weren't hip. Okay, well, where's the afro now? Or, you know, with fashion, things change all the time. And it's good if you want to be involved in a fashion race. And I mean, it's nothing wrong with that. But that really doesn't define that much. It's just there's going to be some different style. Now, there's something underneath style. And that is the substance and the essence of things, which is we're going to change the style. That's underneath it. You have hair, you're going to do something with it. If you go bald, you're going to cut it. And that's what you're going to do. So far as you being a member of the club because you have an afro or you don't, or because you have platform shoes or you don't, or because you're wearing a leisure suit, that was another 1970s thing. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, that once you lose sight of the meaning of things, they could mean anything. And then you're going to go to whatever is the easiest. And the kind of tribal idea or this idea is always the easiest. It's just proven.
So what do you look for, Wynton Marsalis, when you are asking people, for example, to join Jazz at Lincoln Centre Orchestra, which is here with you in Australia?
Knowledge of the history of the music, from be able to play the earliest styles to the music we play now and all the different time signatures and the different ways of playing. Be able to play with meaning and know how to play in the blues idiom. And want to do that.
But the blues is important.
It's important to jazz. It's like the lifeblood of jazz. But once again, it's difficult to learn how to play it with a degree of authority. So it's easy for it to be left out. And things that are difficult, they get left out first.
But would you go so far as to say if the blues isn't present, then it can't be jazz?
For me. I would be comfortable saying that is that for me. I'm not comfortable saying it for somebody else or who, but based on my knowledge of music and those musicians that are most respected in our form, they all could play blues. So we could go down a roll call of them, and every one of them can play some blues, from Louis Armstrong to Ornette Coleman to Chick Corea to Paul Desmond. Everybody could play blues, regardless of their color, where they're from. They had to figure out how to do that.
And is there another line, I wonder, that goes through jazz? I mean, you mentioned Louis Armstrong, and whenever I listen to his recordings, I'm astonished, first of all, at how they crackle with life, but also it seems to me that almost all of jazz is there in that trumpet. That there is Dizzy Gillespie, that there is bebop, there is everything that has come since him was already happening when he blew.
And it was happening before he blew. It was there with Buddy Bolden and Buddy Petit and with Bunk Johnson and with King Oliver, who was his mentor. And it was also there with great cornet soloists. They didn't play blues, but they played the cornet on a certain level. And when we started to put this amalgam of different things together to become jazz, he was a child of all of that. And he was a synthesizer. He was able to combine these great styles and be in the spirit of Buddy Bolden. And then he was also a great singer. He's a great harmonizer, could hear internal harmony parts. He played second cornet. He was just one of those figures that was Promethean. He brought an understanding of what this could do. So Miles said that, with that you can't play nothing on the horn that Louis Armstrong hasn't played. He's even modern. And it's a continuum. It's a continuum.
The America that you live in today is really quite different from the one that you were living in 21 years ago, the last time we spoke. And I wonder whether that also has affected the way you feel about jazz, or maybe even the way that you feel that jazz has something vital to say.
Man, I feel so much stronger about jazz and the values of jazz and people coming together and the importance of that freedom that jazz represents and of the excellence that jazz is. It's the thing that I'm fond of saying is that excellence is a form of protest. And the insight that jazz has and the way that you can work in a collective, these times for our country and for the world, jazz is more necessary and needed than it ever was. And I felt it was needed. But now at the age I am and having dedicated so much of my life to learning about jazz, I'm so grateful I've had the opportunity to be a jazz musician.
And can you say why? I mean, can you say why jazz is more important today than ever?
Because people are lost. And when you start to get a lot of people lost about your values and your fundamentals, and I don't just mean Americans, when you become lost, you have to figure out how you're going to be found. And you need a very powerful symbolism. When your symbolism goes awry, if your financial industries and your political industries fail you, you have to go back to your culture, your cultural identity to reaffirm that which is most sacred and special about being you. It's like if you get really sick, man, you're going home. You're going to look for your mama. And if your mama has passed away, as mine has, and many older people, you're going to have to go to find some family, or you're going home. Because you realize that the way that you can get better and replenish yourself is you have to go home. And jazz is home. It's the best of the home. It is a democratic ideology expressed by people who were being denied it. So they really believed in it.
And a model of cooperation, too.
Yeah, but it would have been very easy for them to just sink down in the protest and say, well, this is not real. It's not a dream for us. But instead, they affirmed it. And they affirmed it from all walks of life, from a Benny Goodman, south side of Chicago, Louis Armstrong's, New Orleans, Jelly Roll Morton, Creole, Dave Brubeck out on the ranch. You can just start naming people and where they came from. People from all over the world. Tete Montoliu from Spain, on and on and on. James Morrison from here. People start to affirm things that are in the music. And now is a great time for the music because it's really more needed than it ever was. And I'm more fired up now than I ever was about it. And I was always fired up about it.
Do you find that the smaller group has a kind of significance, perhaps, for you that, however magnificent a sound you might make with jazz at Lincoln Centre and the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, for example, that you can't get that kind of interaction that you can with 3 or 4 or 5 others?
From an indulgence standpoint, of course. You know, if you sit down to a banquet and there's 3 people, y'all can eat everything. But if you have 400 people there, then you get a portion.
You're going to have better conversations too.
Maybe. You know, I find it, for me, with the big band, that everybody in our band solos, and that people will only play one solo a night. And that they will enjoy playing with a band. And now I have, when we get near the end of the night, we're always trying to figure out who has not soloed. In the early years, it was only me trying to figure out who hasn't played. So the last 2 songs, I got to make sure everybody in the band plays every night, at least one solo. Now, other people in the band are looking around saying, so-and-so didn't play. Let them play this solo. So I feel that, well, I asked Dizzy Gillespie in those years, did he think I should stop playing the small band and play with the big band? And I didn't grow up in a big band tradition. I grew up, we had only played small band. He said if he could have kept his big band together, he would have done it. And he said, one should never consider it an achievement to lose one's orchestral heritage. That was from him. And that was crucial in me deciding, why should our sitting orchestras go away because people like to solo all night? And it's fun. And that's why from that time forward, after that resolution, I've been dedicated to orchestral music and to our orchestra and what we have to say as a collective, because we can make a much more powerful statement together than a soloist can make or 2 or 3 can make.
And is there ever, do you think, a danger in jazz in particular of its being institutionalized?
I think it was always institutionalized. If you look at who played with Louis Armstrong, it's the same 5 or 6 people. If you look at who plays on Blue Note recordings, that was an institution. It was the same rhythm section a lot of times. Bands are institutions. Count Basie's orchestra was an institution. I think the danger for jazz is the danger that we have in the world is for our institutions to be corrupt and corrupted. And corrupted institutions don't serve us. That's how we had the housing crisis, the corruption of the banks. That's how we have certain political crises around the world, a corruption of the political system. We shouldn't throw away the political system because of a corruption of it. That's how we have corruption in religions. It's not because the fact of an organized religion is the problem. The problem is, what is the direction of the leadership of that organization?
So it's up to you and others, institutions in that case, to be examples, I suppose.
It's up to all of us. This is an institution. You are an institution. You've been here. You have values and things that you've been espousing that influence people and a way that you like to do things. If I were to come here and be your intern and study with you, you would teach me to do this or check this out. It doesn't mean you're going to be mean about it, because you're very nice. And your experience has taught you things that you can pass on to a person who does not have that experience. That, in a way, is an institution.
Well, I wasn't going to announce the fact that you were my new intern until later, but thank you anyway.
I wouldn't mind being it. I wouldn't mind it.
Wynton Marsalis, it's been a great pleasure to see you again. Yes, thank you very much for talking to me on The Music Show.
Thank you, Andrew. I hope it's not another 21 years.